In addition to simple color highlights, an override color highlight may be applied to the default highlight for 6 of the 11 parts of speech, namely the verb, participle, infinitive, declinable noun, pronoun, and article. This enables a very effective way of seeing nuances in the Greek by the use of color. Let's take the verb as an example. Apply a default highlight of red, like so. Then ensure that the Enable Color Highlight switch is on. All verbs in the text will be highlighted in red, as shown from this example in Romans chapter 6. Note that for clarity I've disabled color highlights for all other parts of speech. Now let's assume that you wanted to emphasize all verbs that are in the indicative mood by applying a different color highlight, say blue. Instead of tapping Default, tap Mood, then Indicative. The color picker for the indicative mood is now active. Select a blue, then return to the top level. Note that the verb summary now shows Apply Verb Highlight in red type, then Indicative Mood Override in blue type. Tap Apply Changes. Notice that the bulk of verbs in the content view turn blue since most of the verbs are in the indicative. And just to verify, look at epimenomen in verse 1. The tag for it shows that it is a present active subjunctive. Since we applied an override color of blue for the indicative mood, and epimenomen is subjunctive, it takes on the default color of red. As I mentioned at the start, override colors may be applied to 6 parts of speech, namely those for which a color override would actually be meaningful. Override highlights can be applied to the verbs tense, voice, or mood, to the participles tense, voice, or case, to the infinitives tense or voice, to the nouns or articles gender, number, or case, and to the pronouns subtype, personal, relative, reciprocal, demonstrative, correlative, interrogative, indefinite, correlative interrogative, reflexive, or possessive. And just to state what should be obvious, a verb can't, for example, be simultaneously indicative and subjunctive. By definition, moods are exclusive, as are tenses and voices. But the RGNT allows us to set different override highlight colors for a verb's tense, voice, and mood. So if you've been following this, you should be thinking, okay, can I, number 1, apply an override to tense and voice, or maybe even to tense, voice, and mood, and number 2, what happens when I do have more than a single override? What highlight color ends up actually being applied? The answer is in the last advanced feature of the highlight override system, the override order. To demonstrate this, let's add a tense override to our default and mood highlight selections. You selected a default color of red with an indicative mood override of blue. Now let's assume that you've chosen a future tense override of green, like so. Note that I haven't yet tapped Apply Changes. So for all verbs that are neither indicative mood nor future tense, the verb is highlighted in red. Any verb that is in the indicative mood is highlighted in blue, while any verb that is in the future tense is highlighted in green. But what happens if the verb is both indicative mood and future tense, such as erumen in verse 1? Only a single color highlight can be applied, right? As you might expect, the answer is yes. Only a single color highlight may be applied to a given verb. Whether the verb is highlighted in blue because it's indicative mood, or green because it's future tense, depends on how you specify the override order. If you specify an override order of tense, voice, and mood, then the last property in the list, mood, would override both the default and tense, and therefore the highlight color would be blue. If, however, you specify an override order of voice, mood, tense, then the last property in the list, tense, would override both the default and the mood, and the highlight color would be green. There's one last item before closing out the presentation of this feature. You don't have to enable the default color for a given part of speech in order to enable an override color. They are, in fact, independent. So you can disable the verb default color but leave the overrides enabled, like so.